Hello, my name is Matthew, and the other day I got something very, very exciting in the mail that I would like to share with you. And so, um, a couple weeks ago, I read somewhere that the Karamazov brothers is being translated again. It's having a new English language translation by Michael Katz. The first time I heard of Michael Katz was when I saw Crime and Punishment uh, in the bookstore years ago, and I bought it and read it and really enjoyed it. And The Karamazov Brothers is a book that is very important to me. It's one of my favorite books and was instrumental in my reading life. And so to see that there's a new translation coming out in July of this year, I was just so excited. I couldn't wait. I can't wait for July to get this book. And it occurred to me that I see YouTubers that have channel sizes around mine or obviously bigger, but sometimes even much, much smaller, and they acquire early releases. And I thought, well, maybe I could do that. um, but I wasn't sure how to go about it. How do you contact a publisher? Um, and not only do I make these videos and enjoy doing that, but I've also made connections and I've made friends, and I know people that are in the business. So I reached out to somebody asking for help, and I won't get into the details except to say that a couple days ago this arrived, and it is hard to describe the giddiness that I had when I had this book in my hand. The idea that this thing comes out in July, and now it's the end of February, and I have it. It's called a galley copy. It's beautiful, and I love it. I read the first part, and not that there's an obligation, but when the book is being published, I expect to have a video talking about this new translation. I've already made a whole read-along series, a breakdown of the Karamazov brothers. It was either the Macduff translation or maybe the Ignat Avesey translation. And the neatest thing about this book is, as far as I know, it's the first translation in my reading life. Well, I suppose the Richard Pever and Volokhonsky translation did come out. But I do have some issues with the power couple, Pever-Volokhonsky. Certainly, it's admirable. It's incredible that they not only are making these translations, but just going across the board and translating so many things by Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and Chekhov and Nikolai Gogol, and not just the heavy hitters, not just Anna Karenina and Crime and Punishment, but things that are maybe a little bit more off the beaten path from the perspective of an American market, maybe. And the issue that I have with Pever and Volokhonsky is after you read their translation of something by Dostoevsky and their translation of something by Chekhov and Gogol and Tolstoy, I did get the impression that they all have a similar register. Maybe not a similar style, but there's an underpinning similarity of voice, and obviously I can't read Russian, I can't read the original, but the idea that you could read a Gogol story and the style would sort of feel like a Tolstoy story, I do find a little off-putting. It means that Piver and Volonkonsky's writing sensibilities or translating sensibilities are kind of washing over all of these different writers that have very unique voices. Tolstoy doesn't read anything like Dostoevsky. And for each translation that I've read by Piver and Volonkonsky, almost all of them, there's another translator that I prefer. If someone wanted a recommendation, I think Piver and Volonkonsky is certainly a good choice. But for my own tastes, it's never been the best choice. So I prefer the Ignat Avesy translation of The Idiot and the Karamazov brothers. Something else about the Karamazov brothers personally, I read several translations, and I remember I was talking to my old friend Bob. Bob is he's dead now, but I was late teenager, in my early 20s. He was in his 60s. Met him at a coffee shop, and he really got me into books. We would sit there, and he was so well read, so knowledgeable, so well spoken, and he would talk about these stories that are contained in these pages, and I would just listen in awe, and then for whatever he was talking about, I would go off and read it and be filled with eagerness and energy and interest. And there was one day we were sitting there talking, and I said, like, what's like a great book? What's the greatest book I could read? Something like that. And he said, well, the Karamazov brothers. Go read that book. And at the time, I was not an experienced reader, and I went to the bookstore, and they had the Macduff translation, the Penguin translation. And I almost thought that Bob was like pulling a prank on me, because I pick it up and it's this old Russian novel. It's 900 pages long. I buy it and I start reading it, and I remember it was just so intimidating, and the way that even the names of the characters and how Russian the Russian naming system can be confusing depending on it can be complicated. As an example of what's the relationship between people can determine how you address them by name, and so there's all these characters. They all have multiple different names that could be used for them, and it was tough going. It was a really tough book to read, and it felt like work. There were parts that were obviously brilliant that I could see, and it wasn't until years go by that I read it again, and it's more enjoyable, more engaging. Years go by, I read it again, and I'm reading these different translations, and it wasn't until the Ignat Avesy translation where I feel like I cracked the book, and instead of working and wrestling and just trying to understand what I was reading, I was familiar with the story. I knew these characters, and I just became immersed in this incredible story. Personally, I wouldn't recommend, if someone said to me, can you recommend a great book? I wouldn't recommend the Karamazov brothers. because it can be a tough sell. Not that it's an old Russian novel or that it's 900 pages long, but it's a story. If you just read like the back of the tin, it's a murder mystery, and there's going to be a patricide. And so you start reading the book, and the first 100 pages or something is just introducing characters. You keep reading, another 100 pages goes by, another 100 pages, and there's no murder. It's not until halfway into the book, so 400 pages in, before the main event happens. Of course, the murder is besides the point, but if you're not a very experienced reader, you might think, what the heck is going on with this book? What I love is this idea that Dostoevsky is saying, I've got this great story for you, but you don't know any of the people, you don't know any of the context, it's really complicated, and so before I can even start telling you the story, we have to get all this preliminary stuff out of the way. You have to know the paterfamilias of this family. You have to know the complicated relationships between the sons, the siblings, the brothers, and it goes on and on and on. And Dostoevsky is maybe trusting himself, but asking the reader to trust him and say, believe me, it's worth it. I just think is so cool, and it is worth it. Brilliant story. Packs everything in. So I just I'm so grateful. The person that sent this to me, obviously I've already thanked you, so thank you for being so generous and helpful always. And yeah, in July I'll let you know what I think. So couldn't be more excited. So thank you for watching. Please leave a comment if you would like, and take care.